That's what the Enlightenment, modernity, and the capitalists were selling against the king and the church. Reason. And I mean, I don't think that's a bad idea. So Kant sees this struggle between reason and our passions. When we went out and do what is, right procedurally, according to our reason, then that's doing the right thing for its own sake, and that's where we give moral praise. However, you may have noticed that so far we have another circular account. Even if it turns out that the good will acts for the sake of duty alone, we still don't know what the good will is, because now any intelligent inquirer into how they ought to act would go, well, what's my duty? I mean, just doing my duty no matter what, which of course, given that Kant's a German philosopher, conjures up problems. We know there are problems with just doing your duty no matter what. And by the way, so did Kant. His emphasis on duty understands that you don't do your duty no matter what. You have to characterize what form it should take, and he does. Duty, and now look at the circle here. Duty is when one acts out of reverence for the moral law. No chuckles out there, but there should be, because now we're right back where we started, see? Started off with moral law, now we're back to it. Well, this is where the argument would stop, and it would be a terrible argument, and it would make Kant a very uninteresting moral philosopher, except that now Kant begins the impossible task of giving us a single, formalizable moral law. Very important to understand that for him it must be formalizable, a real formula, usable, to judge actions by. Remember, this is the bourgeoisie, this era of the bourgeois, and they just won't take these fudgy, excellent kind of criteria. They won't really, they want to know if you're doing good. So like your boss says, "Did you have a good day?" Sometimes he wants a real definite answer. Well, here's where the drum roll should come in, because Kant's categorical imperative is a magnificent achievement of the philosophical imagination. In the categorical imperative, Kant tries to give a single moral rule, general enough to cover all the Ten Commandments and the Golden Rule, and all other decent rules, and to exclude all of them that won't fit those kind of patterns. And he succeeds to an extent that I would have thought impossible. And I'll quickly tell you what the categorical imperative is. Now, he gives 6 or 7 versions of it. To shorten the day, I've selected one. The categorical imperative runs out like this. And so all you got to do is write this down and always do it, and you'll be good. Congratulations. I don't think it's that easy. But anyway, the categorical imperative is always act so that you can will the rule of your action to be a universal law. Always act so that you can will, the rule of your action to be a universal law. It is an imperative because it is a command. Categorical imperative. It is an imperative because it's a command. You remember Moses didn't come down, Chuck Heston, right? He didn't come down with the 10 suggestions. So like Kant goes, moral rules are commands, not suggestions. So that's the imperative part. Categorical because not hypothetical. You see, we're going to cover a moral theory later that says you should do action X if something else, which is a hypothetical. For Kant, it isn't like that. It's you should do action X, period. A categorical sentence. Commands, so it's pretty, as I say, it's the strong sense of morality that lots of sort of, the older Americans, strong sense of morality. Okay, what does it mean to always act so that you can will the rule of your action to be a universal law? Well, it means that for every action you perform, you could conceivably write a rule. You're tired. You've agreed to go out with someone, but you're tired, and now you don't want to do it. So you lie to them. Now, you could write a rule about that, and it says it's okay to lie to people when you're tired and don't feel like keeping a promise. Well, could you? Under the rule I just read you, could you write such a moral rule consistently? No. Here's why not. Because you'd have to, one, be willing to rule that that's a universal law, which means that all humans begin to behave that way, which would mean there'd be no more promises. Binding obligations of any kind would disappear, and then whatever you might think about that situation, some might like it, even me, it might be anarchy, who knows. But for sure, the institutions upon which the very rule is based would disappear. For Kant, that's a sign you've broken it. The second sign you've broken the categorical imperative is that it must be reversible. By that, and this is as old as the Golden Rule, in fact, all it is a formal explanation of the Golden Rule. You have to be willing to say, would I want anyone to do that to me, and answer yes. So if it's got, here are the criteria it has to meet. It has to be, one, universalizable without restriction, and it has to be reversible. Now, other than that, there's no content to the categorical imperative. That is its content. Universal and reversibility. Now, there are two other important points to make about it quickly. No proper names ever go in moral rules. Now, I need to remind George Bush of this. No proper names ever go in moral praise and blame, ever. Because these imperatives hold for all or none. So no group names go in there. There are no moral rules that go, that thou shalt tell the truth, except for African Americans who we know lie. Or, thou shalt be honest, except for Arabians. No, moral rules aren't like that. They've got to be good for everyone, or they're not good for anyone. They're not even moral if they're not universalizable. And they're also not moral if you can pick out unique exceptions to which they, for some unusual reason, don't apply. They've got to apply universally. This is Kant's theory, anyway. Now, what's more interesting than this so far are the principles that Kant draws from the categorical imperative, and some of which have remained extremely important to us today, and one is still important to me now, I think at least one of them. He draws from this categorical imperative 4 principles. The first one is one that, if it were followed as a moral rule, would make the capitalist economy impossible, at least in its current form. It would also make the state socialist economies that just fail impossible, which they already are under their present form. But anyway, it's the ends principle. The ends principle, Kant says, follows from the categorical imperative, and the ends principle is as follows. Always treat others and yourself as though you were an end and never a mere means.